CIP. Start again. We'll call to order the CIP meeting for Wednesday, August 16th. First agenda item, approval of the minutes from the March 22nd meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the March 22nd, 2023 meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-0. Item number 3, discussion Board of Education CIP projects.
Okay.
Welcome, Chuck.
Yep, I'm gonna jump a little bit ahead of Chuck. I know he doesn't mind, but we had in the handouts a cover sheet that we had talked about in the past about available funds for Board of Ed CIP that was at that $1.1 million amount. And we've adjusted that. The 125 wasn't returned, and we've got notations which Chuck can go into of expenditures that have been applied against that remaining $1 million to date. So I think with that introduction, Chuck, do you want to go?
Yeah, that's fine. So as Mona had mentioned, basically we have 2 projects that we're doing this summer. One is the phase 1 of the Stevens HVAC project, and then we move forward with doing the science labs as well. So those are coming out of the balance that was available in the capital non-recurring account. And then we also do have the GMS roof project. So those are all on track according to schedule and will be completed this summer. And after that, as Mona has in her worksheet, we anticipate having a remaining balance of about $365,000. So with that, we'll have to have some discussion, I guess, at our Board of Ed level as to what may go on with those funds. There is talk of the state again coming out with additional funds for HVAC projects, which typically are not reimbursable at this point in time, but they have allocated funds on a competitive basis that districts can apply for. So that's basically a brief overview as to where we currently are in our projects and the remaining funds that could be used towards other additional capital projects.
Okay, any questions for Chuck on where the Board of Ed is and what they're doing at this point?
So we've got phase 1 of the Stevens HVAC going this summer. What does that entail, and how many phases do we have left to complete?
We have, depending on how, from a dollar value, we broke it out into 4 phases total. So this is phase 1. Again, we just did it based on dollars available. And so what we'll do is have our architect or engineer, based on those remaining dollars available and how that moves forward based on from a budgeting standpoint as to, how we put together those last phases, I guess you could say. We just broke it out that way for budgeting purposes.
And then
So Chuck, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to switch to the science classroom, so I don't know if you had a follow up on that one.
Well, I was just going to kind of ask in general. So the 125,000 that wasn't returned to the town was in your budget originally. I'm assuming that was utilized somewhere else within your budget.
No, the 125 was just estimated based on previous dollars returned to the town. So it
Okay,
wasn't in a budget anywhere. That was just estimated operating funds that might be able to be returned in the budget. But with the, the cut that we received, we weren't able to return those funds.
okay. And then on the budget, it says like the HVAC project, it looks like I want to say expended or plan to expend 344,000, but so far we've only spent 185.
Yeah, I think we've,
Am I reading
Yeah,
it
this-
right?
Yes,
let me that the total, yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. So basically you've set aside the additional funds to complete those phases of those projects.
Right, exactly. And those
Yeah.
are ongoing projects that'll be complete this summer.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood the way the spreadsheet kind of
Yeah.
flowed.
yes.
Chris, go ahead and with your other question.
And then for the science labs, how are we progressing through that project? How many have we done? How many have left to go?
We have one more phase of that to go, which we've and we're estimating roughly 300,000 for that.
And then for the GMS roof, is that a multi-phase
No,
project? Or are we doing the whole thing?
no, that's the whole thing, and that'll be we're basically on the final completion of that, so that'll be done shortly.
Great.
I mean, along with the roof project we had previously, but we haven't moved forward with it, was the overhang at GMS. But due to the dollar value associated with it, we decided not to move forward with that.
And one more thing, you mentioned that we might get that HVAC. There might be a grant available for the HVAC or funds that aren't usually reimbursable. Is there anything that you need from the town if those funds do become available in terms of support to pursue that grant?
Yeah, there are authorizations that the town council would have to make. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into the application process, but from the town's aspect, we have to show that those funds have been set aside, for the project.
So
So,
at this point, oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
well, yeah, so we have to show this funds are set aside. So does that mean that it would be above and beyond what we've already allocated, or how does that work? Because we certainly do like getting creative about how we can pursue grants. So is there anything that we have to do in advance of those grants becoming available?
Yeah, basically the town just has to set motions in place or authorizations, for the board to move forward with it. The funding, like I said, has to be in place. The only funding in place right now that might be able to be used for that is the balance that we're anticipating having left after these projects are complete of 365. From the board standpoint, those discussions would have to take place, whether to allocate it towards the HVAC project or possibly put those funds in place so that we could move forward with the remaining science lab at GMS, that type of thing.
Thanks.
Lisa, any questions or?
I'm just wondering, to kind of follow up with what Chris was asking, what the timelines are and when you would expect to get back to us, and maybe not this group, but at the council level, when would you be reaching out to say you needed money? And, do you have an idea of what that dollar amount might look like? Because I would hate to say, hey, we're applying for this grant and we need X amount of money, and then we're scrambling. So is there like a plan? And maybe that's on the spreadsheet, and I honestly, I didn't look up that spreadsheet yet. Is there a timeline and a plan and a dollar amount so that we can anticipate and start to save for those needs, or at least consider where that funding might come from?
Well, right now in our CIP for the remaining phases of the HVAC project at Stevens, we're projecting if after phase one is complete, basically $2.1 million. So there's no other money at this point in time budgeted for that. So, you know, other than, like I said, the remaining capital non-recurring balance of 365. So it all depends on how the budget flows, because part of moving forward at the council level is putting in those authorizations for a certain dollar value being available. So right now, the only dollars of value available are this 365. So until the dollars are made available, we really wouldn't come to the council.
If I just to jump in, so we do have those, we go through a process of 3 resolutions as Chuck is saying, then we usually bring them to finance and they're basically, ready to go. There's one missing piece, which is waiting for Board of Ed to say, are they going to use the 365 for a 700,000, or are we going to wait for a plan for something greater? Is that
Okay.
basically it, Chuck?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, right now, those are the only funds available. So through various conversations, we can, I would have to get direction from the board as to how they want to go about using those funds.
I think our concern is just we don't want to miss out on a potential grant if there's a way to augment, the town staff or the town's portion of a project to do something bigger. So as long as we're on top of that, then we're in a good spot.
Yeah, and typically, like I said, these are funds that the state has made available for specifically HVAC projects. I don't know when that's going to go away, or how that may look going forward. So it's tough to say from that standpoint. And it is
I'm sorry.
Yeah, at this point, it is a competitive type environment because at the time they only set a certain dollar values aside. So when that's gone, it's gone unless they renew that in some form or fashion.
So with its 3 projects going on now simultaneously, there's no chance of interruption with any of these projects?
No, they're on the tail end of being completed now.
Okay.
Is it?
I think that was my biggest concern. I probably didn't articulate that properly, but.
And yeah, just so I understand. So right now, the 3 projects are the GMS roof, the science classrooms, and the HVAC project.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And you don't anticipate starting any new projects until these wrap up?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right.
As I always tell you, you're more than welcome to stay for the town CIP discussion. But we won't be offended if you opt not to.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate being first on the agenda. All right.
Thanks,
Have a
Chuck.
good discussion. Thank you.
I will move on to the discussion of the town CIP projects.
You want to jump in with Craig since he's out in the field right now?
Sure, whichever way you'd like to go.
Craig?
And unmute himself.
He's figuring it out.
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me now? I'm on Zoom on my phone, so I apologize. Do you guys have me?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Well,
What kind of questions do you have for me?
If I could, I'll jump in a little. We had the 3 pages of our existing CIP plan. And as you know, the first page we've had funded, and the second page shows those with other sources. So we've asked Craig and Steve and Kim to come in and talk about those on that unfunded section, and maybe talk about some of the larger ticket items. So I don't know if you wanted to start with one of your unfunded
Yeah.
line items, Craig, maybe your pool.
Well, how much time do we have? We want to be done by 6, right? So,
So you got 5 minutes, Greg.
all right. Yeah. So, we've gone out in the past and gotten some quotes on a couple of different pool options. We did do a master plan, about a year and a half ago. It actually finished up. I got the report actually almost a year ago with some approximate costs for, renovating the existing pool. I've got a new pool option. I've met with another company in the winter time about a different option, which would be to actually put in a stainless steel liner, which is like a newer thing for places that don't want to rebuild new pools. So you kind of put this stainless steel membrane inside of the existing pool, with a new gutter system, since all the other guts are in place, which is definitely a much more cost-effective option as well if you don't want to spend the money for a new pool. I think current trends as far as pools go is, you do want to go, a lot of pools are getting away from deep ends, and they're maxing out at about 5 feet depth. So that's another thing that we could possibly consider with our existing pool if we didn't want to go down the road of a new pool. There's so many different variables. Like in our case, we do have an aging pool. If we were to upgrade the pool, we obviously would want to upgrade the existing bathhouse, and bring that up to code since it's an old building. There's always been the talk of a splash pad and how much that would cost. I've got some numbers on that. So again, this is a very loaded conversation. So if you want to go item by item, or if you guys want to fire questions at me, I'd be happy to answer everything I know. And if I don't know it off the top of my head, I would be happy to get you answers, ASAP. Sometimes I might have to talk to one of our architects who actually helped us with the Elmridge master plan. He might be able to give me some more specifics as well, but happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Well, I'm thinking at this point, there's so many different options. I think. Did you say you have costs associated with these options?
Yeah, I do.
You do.
I do. And again, we went more like a middle of the road type of planning with some of this stuff, and not to put a sticker shock on any of you, but we're talking millions of dollars. Anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10, maybe more, depending on what you do at the bathhouse or what additional amenities you put into the pool. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it's going to get, unfortunately.
8 to 10 million is 8 million would be the low. Is that what you're saying?
That would be kind of on the lower end for a new pool, yeah. And that's with, that's a slightly bigger footprint than what we have right now, but that doesn't have a deep end. And that's just the option we chose when we went through the master planning process. Again, we'd have to hire an architect and maybe the plan would change. But that was just an estimate given to us by Mike Fortuna from TLB Architecture, who's one of the more respected and architects, engineers in the aquatics field.
When you say it's the pool, it's not the bathhouse and everything that goes along with it?
No, if you know, the bathhouse adds an additional cost as well. We've gotten some estimates anywhere from 1.5 to 1.7 to have the bathhouse, because when you're gonna need to have new filter rooms, new bathrooms, things of that nature. And then you have to pipe the pool into the filter rooms. So that's just part of that.
And the splash pad is extra?
Yeah, splash pad. That's probably the quote I got last year was around 690 for the 690,000 for the footprint that we had. I don't know the exact footprint off the top of my head. I do have a square footage number on it. I think it was like 3,500 square feet. So
Big.
splash pad, 3,200 square feet actually, with recycled water.
And then can I just ask one more question, Chris?
Yeah, go ahead.
What about like the zero entry with the ramp into the pool?
So that would be part of this proposal.
Okay.
Would be to have a zero depth entry pool. Yep. Yeah, a lot of pools nowadays that are being built new, they're almost all new construction on pools is zero depth entry for ADA purposes.
All right, Chris, I don't have any more questions.
So, and thanks. So I was thinking, when you said bathhouse, I was thinking of changing areas, those type of
Yeah.
shower. So, but then you also mentioned the filters and the pool. So is it possible to do the bathhouse separately, or is that where the pool filters and that type of mechanisms are as well?
That's all part of it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and they're sectioned off. They're in a different area. But yeah, most bathhouses now, everything's all encompassing. The locker rooms are separate. Locker rooms, changing areas, bathrooms are separate from, your filters.
So if I put in the new pool, I need to at least put, I guess I would have called it a pump house, but I'm not, a pool guy. You'd still need to redo that type of equipment that goes into the maintenance of the pool. Has to be done at the same time, or can it be parceled out?
No, you need to do all that at the same time.
Okay, and that wouldn't be included in that 8 to 10.
Not technically with this proposal, but I mean, if we designed a pool that is a smaller footprint or a different design, it might fit in that number. I don't want to, I don't want to shortchange us or give us a low number. I want to try and give you guys as a reasonable number as possible, so we at least know, like,
yeah, I
these
think
are
it's
real
good
numbers.
just to know what the universe looks like. One thing I was thinking of, my kids go to different towns on play dates and have to pay to use their pool. I think Weathersfield has some sort of, a visitor pass, it's free for residents, or it's a one cost of residents. And then it's for out of town folks. It's, it might be $10 or something like that. Like, it's not a non-zero number, but is there anything in terms of management that would go in with the new pool that we don't have? Or is that like you check in with staff at the booth? Is that something we need to consider?
No, that's something we already have in place. And we have in place that we charge out of town residents, whether it's a different fee or not, moving forward, that's a totally different conversation, but we already have those mechanisms in place. Plus we have online, components as well with, we have iPads and we take cards and we do all that stuff already. So, the one thing we might consider if we were getting a splash pad might be just increase costs so that you could keep it open from Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend, which is pretty common in the field, but it's not something that you necessarily need to staff.
And then you mentioned that stainless steel liner.
Yeah.
In just, and I don't know if we have a number on it, but what's the scale of the cost savings associated with that versus
Oh,
going new?
it's completely different. I mean, it's a fraction of the cost. And it usually gives you a 25-year warranty on it. So if we were to do that, the number I have from last January was about 375,000
Old.
to put in the membrane, the stainless steel membrane. And there's all kinds of components to it. There's fiberglass behind the walls, and there's PVC and et cetera. But it's supposed to basically, in New England, with the moving of the earth from the winter to the spring thaw, the ground moves. This is supposed to be material that will shift with the ground to prevent cracking. And then you'd have to put in a new gutter system, and that was about I want to say it was 160. So I think total for that, it was 374 plus 163 for the perimeter gutter system. So
potentially, if we looked at, well, we got a number of options to consider, but if it was splash pad, new bathhouse, liner, gutter, that would be somewhere in the ballpark of $2.5-3 million, something like that.
yes. And we're kind of thinking on the same wavelength there, Chris, because that's something, I would consider proposing in lieu of, the sticker shock new, super duper pool. I definitely think the building's old. Our guards right now don't even have like a place they can go on break and like eat. They don't have like a guard locker room. That bathhouse there is very dated. It's just as old as the pool. And there's really no magic fix for that.
Craig, let me just, Mona, do we have anything set aside from prior budget years for the town pool?
Nothing substantial, and I think I'd have to go back and look at that. I may
Okay.
be able to grab it while we're here.
And so Craig, knowing let's just make the assumption we're starting at 0 today as a budget.
Yes. Yep.
What are, besides the town putting money into funding a pool, which we've had some challenging budget years, what are other alternatives that we have to raise funding to facilitate what you're looking for?
Unless we want to do some kind of public-private partnership or, you could take a look at special revenue funding potentially as an alternative source.
Mhm.
That might be another source of funds that we could use. I haven't really researched the grant market, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. If I was guessing, I'd guess it's probably not a realistic option.
Okay. So a public-private partnership may be something that we can consider. Special revenues, another option. We just got to look at as many alternatives as we can.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mona's ears are kind of perking up on special revenue usage.
You know it.
So,
Yeah. And to follow up on that, Alan, I didn't think so, but we have only small amounts, which Craig knows that we had for the field use, but we had 10,000 set aside for that upgrade to pool. We do have a non-reoccurring about 200,000 that's called undesignated. So if we made the choice at a finance meeting to designate it, then we have that flexibility.
okay. So basically, I mean, for all practical purposes, we're at 0.
Right. It's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. So, all right.
Is it something that we would even consider? And I don't want to use the word regionalize, but collaborate with another surrounding town who doesn't have, is in the same situation that we are, and just be the host town. I don't know if anyone would even do that, leave their town and go to a different town to use the pool, but.
Well, I could tell you, we get a lot of people already that come from out of town. I don't have the number in front of me, but I could tell you guys exactly to a T how many number of out of town visits we had this summer, because we track all that.
Yeah.
I know we get a lot of residents from Cromwell, for sure. I know we get a lot of residents of Hartford that come in. So, you know, that's something I could definitely research. I think the problem with any regionalization on anything you do, whether it's capital equipment or what have you, is okay, what happens when something breaks? Who's paying for it?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely would have to have some type of legal contract and, share all of the
Yeah.
expenses. But I'm just thinking in terms of grant money, I think you're right. And then even if we got money, it's a matter of prioritizing it. And there's probably another need. But the state is really into that, municipalities working together, especially for the infrastructure money that President Biden is handing out. And so maybe this is a project that, we can call one of those experts and say, hey, would this fly? And maybe that's a way to get the funding for it, potentially.
Can I change gears here a little bit? We're getting really deep in the weeds right at this point.
Yep.
And I know Kim has a meeting pretty soon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Yeah, yeah.
but I'd like, this is really something that we need to look at. And it kind of ties into what I'm trying to do with the capital improvement program process, which is a little bit different than a capital budget. I'd like to start this year with a format where we will be sending out forms to every department, to the directors. For example, the community development services, keep on this form, what do we need to do in the future? What are we looking at in the long range? Capital improvement planning is really looking at large ticket, permanent, physical structures. They're physical, they're large and they're permanent, and they cost a lot of money. And usually we look at capital planning over a 6-year period. So each department will be looking at what they think we need, and where they think we can find money to do that, how much it might cost. And, through Mona and OpenGov, our new budget format,
Clear out.
items could be all analyzed in the spreadsheet. But saying that, this also ties into what I'd like to do, hopefully this year, is to tie all this into a community-wide strategic plan that I had mentioned a while back. We need to have a vision of what we want to be like in the next 10 years. And all these projects floating around, they need to be coordinated and address that plan, I think. So what I'd like to do is start a strategic planning process. We'll be looking at CCM and other sources for funding or assistance to do that. Prices are not outrageous to hire a consultant to come in and do that, but I think that will help us get focused in the future when we start looking at, starting our capital improvement planning every year.
I think that would be very welcomed, because I know I say this every year that Glastonbury has the most beautiful CIP book, separate and distinct from the budget. Yeah, but I mean, it's, they prioritize, they justify, they
Right.
identify funding sources, they have a wish list booklet for residents to contribute. I mean, it's all right there and easy to follow. And It's kind of like putting money in your Christmas club account, you know, like when you were a kid. And then you have something.
And there are all sorts of different funding, you know, there are, of course, most of these projects would require bonding, or there are other types of bonds beyond general obligation.
Mhm,
But, you know, we need to look at funding sources also.
mhm. Oh, that's perfect.
With that said, can we
Okay.
jump on to,
Before we let Craig go, I've got there's been a couple questions and I'm not sure if other people in the council have gotten them as well, but just one of the funded items was about I saw it was under the Maxwell cricket field conversion. And I know there was
Mhm.
also in our last meeting, we were talking about Sunnycrest and how do we site a 460-foot field, if I have that number down right. So could you just clarify what we're looking at doing with these two, as I understand them, two separate asks, and what it looks like for next steps?
Yeah, so quickly, obviously the Maxwell project is funded. It's looking like we probably will not put shovels in the ground until most likely in the spring, and that's because of the amount of earthwork that we have to do with stripping of the clay of the existing softball field. It might spill over into our soccer areas, and we need as much space for the soccer during this fall season because this is a primary season for soccer. But in terms of Sunnycrest, the issue with Sunnycrest is just the way the existing field lays. If you want to put a 75-foot by 10-foot wide pitch in that park and play right now, it'll fit, but it sits right in the middle of center field of the existing baseball field, and which is also that outfield area is also where soccer's played in the fall. Now, I'm not opposed to I guess losing a soccer field to accommodate this full-size field. But I think in general, Sunnycrest needs a little bit of a rearrangement. If you go there now, the existing baseball backstop, there's probably another 100 feet to the tree line and beyond to at least reorientate the fields, and you might be able to fit both, and there won't be any, cross, I don't want to say contamination, but you guys get what I'm saying. Like, I can't eliminate a baseball field to accommodate a cricket field right now, I guess to make it solely a designated cricket area. But I'm looking at options to be able to do both. So,
Okay, so the youth field sounds like in the spring, and then
Yeah.
is for the Sunnycrest field, you're looking at options, so that's not something that would be funded. That's that currently.
not this fiscal year, no.
Thanks.
We want to move on to Kim, so she can get to her planning and zoning meeting.
Okay.
What does Kim have on here? Is what I'm looking at. Yes.
I'm
I want to thank Ray for coming up with something that's already been in existence for a number of decades, which is capital improvements planning and strategic planning process. I think a lot of what I see on these sheets are not necessarily non-reoccurring large expense items. I think a lot of things like maintenance in general should be budgeted item. And that's, I know it's not my bailiwick, but based on capital improvements planning, that would certainly not be included there. I want to thank Lisa Murata for mentioning the word regionalization. I know that there's been discussion in the past from working in the Community Development Services Department about sharing pieces of equipment that are seldom utilized. And yes, legal agreements on maintenance, it should be in place. Obviously, they should have cost sharing, they should have maintenance agreements where everybody contributes to that, the various towns, and maybe use the Central Connecticut Health District, the 4 towns that we work with respect to health related issues, maybe use that as our basis, or at least talk about it. What about facilities? We're talking about the town pool, the use it has for the time it's open. It may behoove us to look at other towns coming in and having memberships to that town pool. But once again, as town manager Carpentino said, we're getting into the weeds. Let's look at the broad brush and what are our priorities? What is our inventory? What is our priorities? And who's setting these priorities? Because what's priority for the Parks and Rec director may not be what's priority for a community development director, or may not be priority for a finance director, but the finance director could certainly add dollars and cents to everything. Typically in this process, it's tied to the plan of conservation and development. And if we're doing a strategic plan, it's about time, and I want to thank you for that. Don't know what else I can say.
And just to follow up, my purpose to have Kim here is she's the town planner. And I think it's kind of necessary to have the town planner involved in the capital improvement program for the future of the town. So I hope she continues to attend the meetings.
Please attend the meetings, Kim.
I shall. I mean, it's nice to see. I mean, we got a lot of land acquisition through, of course, it was through bonding, what have you. But that's the type of thing we would use these types of funds for. I'm thinking ahead, and as we do our plan of conservation and development, we too send forms out to various departments to say, okay, what are your priorities? What are your needs? What are your wishes? And why? And how do you justify them? And that's what you should be doing here as well. And then we get that information back. It's weeded out through the planning commission, which is one of the arms of our planning and zoning commission. And they put together the document. It is a public document. It's a town document. And everybody has a say in what goes into that. We thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, Kim. Ray, what else do we have on the town side?
Dave, you want to jump in?
You say me there, Ray?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, so we have a whole host of items for community development. There's a whole host of sidewalks, many of which have been funded by other sources. I'd just like to give you a quick rundown. So you have Century Hills phase 1, which is half the road, and then we do have the second phase, and that we have a LoCIP grant. We were awarded that. We just don't have the agreement yet with the state to proceed. Washington Street, that's another one that's funded. We have not bid it. Glastonbury Ave sidewalks down towards the river. That was a grant that we applied for LoCIP and were awarded. Again, we're still awaiting the okay from the state, the agreement that we need. Belden Lane Culvert, that's coming out of the road referendum. That's an issue that is ongoing with it's rotting, it's metal pipe, so it's rotting away, and the head wall's collapsing. So we have some challenges with that with wetlands and stuff, but we're going ahead with that. On to the unfunded. I mentioned the Century Hills phase 2. We do have that. Our road repairs that we're doing right now, our normal road repairs, that's out of the referendum. The industrial park phase 2 culvert replacement, I need to go out for we have $500,000 grant. I'm not sure if we have that money yet or not.
No, we're not
Not
sure.
yet.
Yeah, so that's gonna go for a engineer to come up with the design of a bridge into the industrial park phase 2, which is, we call the sand pit or the Russo property, heading off that way. So that is, we need to do an RFP, RFQ, get qualified consultants and interviews select. And that's gonna be coming out of that grant. One of the big ones here is Beach Road. And I know the mayor's been out there, I think with me, and she's seen the issues out there. The road periodically floods, couple feet sometimes, and you trap residents on the other side. This has been on the CIP. I found it on some that are back in the 70s. So this thing's been around for a long time. I see it here as unfunded for 24-25. It's gonna be very expensive. We first need a consultant to do the design and go through all the permitting. Chances are it's gonna need Army Corps of Engineers permitting, which takes time. And then it's the actual construction, and it's such a narrow road, it's maybe 18 feet wide there. You're gonna need a temporary bridge, do the construction, remove the temporary bridge. It's gonna have to come up higher, of course. So that's a big challenge. That's, you know, we're showing 1.5 mil. Really don't know.
Is that a LoSiP? Could that be a LoSiP project?
Oh, we've looked at every kind of funding possibility for that, and it's doesn't fall into anybody's category. It's not recognized by the state because it's too small of a bridge. It's not recognized because of the type of road. It's very isolated. You know, we've looked at a number of different funding opportunities, and they've all been kind of squashed.
How about FEMA?
Yeah, when our
We
previous
tried that.
POC, he looked into that, and yeah, it didn't qualify there either.
I'm wondering, is my mic on? I'm wondering, so Hartford, the lawmakers just passed something where Hartford residents can tap into, I want to say, is it $5 million worth of funding for all of the historic flooding that's been going on there, impacting residents and businesses.
Mhm.
And I reached out to MDC because MDC is part of that. And I think because it has to do with MDC water and not
Probably.
necessarily like rivers or
Yep.
streams or whatever, to see if, you know, there was money for us somewhere for flood. Do you think this is like a project that we can approach them or
MDC.
yeah, no.
I mean, they're talking MDC, the backwaters backing up into their basements and stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, we do have a major MDC line coincidentally going right through there. But and they've already done some work for us. Because they had to get in anyways. So what happens is their line basically follows the creek in there. And they're getting some erosion, and it was gonna affect their manhole structures. So part of the agreement was for them to get in and do the disturbance. They built us a new head wall for the pipes that were there. But that's probably about as far as we're gonna get out of them. So.
Anything else, Steve?
I'm just looking down the list here. I'm looking at community development. I mean, I'm guessing Mona will probably take public works.
Speaking of that, what
No,
about
you may
the,
want to touch on that one.
All right.
Steve,
public
because I
works
don't like-
facility, or actually the tank, the underground
Mhm.
tank that needs to be replaced within the next few years, right? The
Which
fuel-
one are you talking about?
Got the garage.
Fuel tanks.
Fuel tanks?
Fuel tanks, I think are 2027 have to go. I don't have the exact, it's either 27 or 28. I don't have that information in front of me. I can get that for you. But yeah, so we have to replace those tanks, and they go above ground now. So it's you can see an example right across the street at the firehouse has one.
And is that a state or federal mandate? to
Yes.
bring them up?
Yes. Yep. So
And
that has to happen.
any,
And
Are
yeah,
we-
diesel and gas.
are we very aware of any, I guess, carrots for early adopters or sticks for folks who are late?
No, I am not aware of any. It's something we can look into. You know, and as you know, a lot of people are converting their fleets to electric, but in order to do that, you know, that's also a cost because you have to bring in the charging stations and, you know, and that's another item on this list is the garage is very antiquated. You know, Dante, I've spoken to this before. We have a facility that doesn't even have a ladies' room. doesn't have showers, doesn't have lockers. It's old. It's from the 50s. So,
That should be either rehabbed or rebuilt
yes,
or relocated and rebuilt.
yep. Yep. I mean, I get into other towns' garages for, one reason or another. I mean, Cromwell just built a nice one right over the line here. But I was in Ellington yesterday for an interview panel, and their garage is probably from I would say the 70s. But they had separate facilities, they had the locker rooms, they had the showers, that's 30, 40-year-old structure. And what else does he have on here? The Leaf unit, we were asked to look
We're
at
good with those. Yeah.
privatizing that. Nobody does it. We're and you can bag, but again, that's it. I have a whole study on that. I mean, that's for another time, but we did look at privatizing it, and you can't find anybody who will do that.
We had the industrial park phase 2.
That's what I was mentioning about the grant we have for the bridge to get in.
Yeah, and Ray, do we have any traction on folks who might be looking to build out there that can offset that cost, or?
Not anymore. We had all of our traction was, from 2005 to probably 2010. And right now, since the solar farm takes up probably the prime 15 or 17 acres. There has not been an interest in that area because it is so far away. And it'd be great for a large distribution facility.
Mhm.
You have to be careful, Peter. It does overlay the level A aquifer, the water supply for parts of Glastonbury and Cromwell. So
Yeah.
it's careful of what goes there, or if something potentially toxic is going in, it needs to be managed and constructed in a way that will pollute the groundwater.
There are 2 parcels in there, as you probably know, and the rear parcel is basically landlocked, and it just changed hands. It was owned by the Russos forever, and
Yeah,
they
that's
just sold it to I'm not sure who he is.
54 acres of that Russo property, and then we have a total of 62 acres, and then you cut out about 15 or 17 acres for the solar farm, and then the highway public works, they're using that for a lot of their
Materials.
materials and stumps and brush.
Yeah, if you folks haven't, I would ask you to take a tour of the schedule a tour of the highway facilities down there, and even in the sand pits, and see the piles of brush that we collect.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right. I'll make the assumption we have nothing for other,
Nothing,
safe assumption,
correct.
right? Anything?
No,
Nothing.
no, I think Craig fell asleep.
He's still there? He's still there.
Are you still with us? All right, if there's nothing for other, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? Second, all in favor? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.